Ramos vanished the same night Adrian Coe's warehouse system went dark, and by morning, his shipping empire was already rewriting her existence, as if she had never worked there at all. In Singapore's busy port district, Adrian Coe was known as one of the most powerful shipping tycoons in Southeast Asia. His company controlled a wide network of cargo routes that connected China, Malaysia, Indonesia, and Europe. Every day, hundreds of containers passed through his warehouses, and every shipment depended on systems he designed with strict precision. To the outside world, he represented success, discipline, and control in a highly competitive industry. Behind that image, however, his business operations were built on silence, pressure, and secrets that were never recorded in official reports. Adrian's main headquarters overlooked the harbor, where ships lined up like floating giants waiting for clearance. From his office, he monitored global trade movements through multiple screens through air-tracked vessels in real time. Employees described the environment as intense, where mistakes were not tolerated and curiosity was often discouraged. Promotions were rare, and those who questioned procedures were usually removed from sensitive departments without explanation. Inside this controlled system worked Liza Ramos, a Filipina accountant who had joined the company several years earlier. She started in a junior finance role, handling routine bookkeeping and expense tracking. Her discipline and attention to detail quickly set her apart. Over time, she was given access to more confidential records involving international transactions, vendor payments, and shipping invoices tied to high-value cargo. As Liza moved deeper into the company's financial structure, she began noticing patterns that did not align with standard shipping operations. Some payments were routed through unfamiliar companies registered in distant regions. Certain transactions appeared and disappeared between reporting cycles, leaving gaps that could not be easily explained. At first, she assumed it was administrative restructuring or delayed documentation, but the irregularities continued to grow. The more she investigated within her allowed access, the more she realized that parts of the financial system were deliberately hidden. Large sums of money moved through accounts that had no clear business purpose. Some records were duplicated with altered details, while others were completely missing from audit trails. These inconsistencies suggested that someone within the upper levels of the company had full control over what could and could not be seen. Despite her growing concerns, Liza remained silent, knowing that raising questions in such an environment could end her career immediately. She began documenting what she found in private, carefully comparing internal records with external shipping data. What started as routine accounting work slowly turned into a quiet investigation that placed in a dangerous position without her fully realizing it. Adrian Coe's attention to Liza Ramos did not happen suddenly. It developed through repeated exposure to her work inside the financial division, where her reports consistently revealed mistakes that others overlooked. In a company driven by speed and precision, such accuracy quickly became valuable. She was gradually assigned to more confidential tasks, moving from standard accounting files into restricted financial summaries linked to major shipping contracts. As her access increased, so did her proximity to Adrian's inner circle. She began attending high-level meetings where shipment valuations, international contracts, and logistics costs were discussed in detail. Her role was no longer limited to checking numbers, but extended into verifying complex financial structures tied to overseas operations. This shift placed her in a position where she could see the business beyond its public image. During this period, Adrian Coe started involving her directly in sensitive decisions. Instead of filtering information through multiple departments, he began relying on her assessments for financial clarity. This unusual level of trust raised quiet concerns within the company, as very few employees were ever moved so quickly into confidential layers of the organization. Some senior staff who had worked for years felt bypassed, while others began watching her movements closely. Outside formal work, her relationship with Adrian became increasingly personal in tone and frequency. Late-night meetings extended beyond office hours, and discussions often moved away from routine business matters into private conversations. This blurred boundary created an environment where professional structure weakened, and influence became harder to define. Within the company, speculation spread, though no one could confirm the true nature of their connection. At the same time, Liza continued reviewing financial data that revealed deeper irregularities. She noticed repeated patterns of large transfers routed through multiple jurisdictions, often disappearing into accounts that had no visible connection to shipping operations. Some entries suggested coordination between warehouse activity and offshore entities, but but the links were carefully obscured through layered transactions. The more she studied these records, the more she realized that certain parts of the company were operating outside normal regulatory boundaries. Shipping manifests did not always match financial reports, and some cargo movements appeared unregistered in official systems. These inconsistencies suggested a parallel structure functioning alongside the legitimate business. Her growing awareness placed her in an increasingly isolated position. While she gained influence and access, she also became more entangled in information that carried risk. Every new document she reviewed deepened the complexity of what she was observing, making it hard to distinguish between standard corporate operations and deliberate concealment. The company's largest warehouse was located deep in Singapore's industrial corridor, far from the main port activity that the public usually saw. It was a massive structure with high ceilings, reinforced walls, and controlled entry points monitored around the clock. On paper, it functioned as a standard logistics hub for imported goods, but its operational patterns did not match the rest of the company's network. Certain sections were always restricted, and only a small group of employees had clearance to enter during late hours. Liza Ramos first became aware of the warehouse anomalies while cross-checking shipment records against financial logs. She noticed that several container IDs listed in accounting systems had no corresponding physical delivery confirmations. At the same time, warehouse software showed activity during hours when no scheduled shipments were supposed to be processed. These inconsistencies created a gap between digital records and real-world movement. As she continued examining internal databases, she discovered that some shipments were repeatedly reassigned new tracking numbers after arriving at the warehouse. Instead of being stored under their original identifiers, they were relabeled and redistributed through altered documentation paths. This process erased their origin history and made them nearly impossible to trace through standard auditing methods. Security logs added another layer of concern. Access records showed that certain restricted zones were entered without proper authorization codes. In some cases, entries were marked as system overrides, bypassing normal verification steps entirely. Surveillance footage from those time periods was incomplete, with missing segments that coincided exactly with high-value cargo movements. Liza began mapping these irregularities against external shipping data and discovered a pattern that suggested coordinated manipulation across multiple departments. Financial records, warehouse operations, and logistics schedules all appeared to be adjusted in alignment with one another. This level of synchronization indicated that the system was not breaking down accidentally, but being controlled deliberately. The deeper she went, the more she realized that the warehouse functioned as more than a storage facility. It appeared to operate as a central point where undocumented cargo was processed and redirected. Some entries suggested involvement from external partners, but their identities were hidden behind coded references and generic company names. Despite the growing risk, she continued collecting evidence in silence. Every layer she uncovered made it clearer that the warehouse was part of a structured operation designed to remain invisible to standard oversight. The system was built with precision, ensuring that even if one layer was examined, the next would conceal the truth completely. The evening lie. Ramos was called to the warehouse began like any other late audit assignment. She received a request tied to urgent shipment discrepancies that required immediate financial verification. The timing was unusual, as such reviews were normally scheduled during daytime operations, but the message emphasized confidentiality and urgency. When she arrived at the industrial zone, the surrounding area was unusually quiet, with minimal vehicle movement and reduced lighting around nearby facilities. The warehouse appeared operational from a distance, but as she approached the entrance, she noticed that standard loading activity was absent. Docking bays that were normally active with forklifts and container movement were completely still. Security presence was also different from usual, with fewer guards stationed at visible checkpoints. The entry process, however, remained strictly controlled, and she was allowed inside after routine identity verification. Once within the facility, the atmosphere felt disconnected from normal working conditions. Internal corridors were dimly lit, and large sections of the warehouse floor were empty. The usual sound of machinery and coordinated logistics activity was missing, replaced by silence that made every step more noticeable. She was guided toward a restricted office area where financial terminals were set up for reviewing shipment records. Inside the office space, she accessed internal systems to verify the disputed entries. The data she found confirmed previous inconsistencies on a larger scale. Multiple high-value shipments were listed without proper authorization trails, and several financial adjustments had been made shortly before her arrival. These edits appeared recent, suggesting active manipulation of records rather than historical errors. As she attempted to secure copies of the files for external backup, she noticed sudden disruptions in system connectivity. Network access became unstable, and key communication channel stopped responding. The internal server logs indicated unusual administrative activity occurring simultaneously across multiple terminals. This suggested that system controls were being overridden in real time. The situation escalated as the warehouse environment changed from inactive to highly controlled. Movement restrictions were enforced through internal protocols, and access to external communication was cut off. The facility's normal operational transparency disappeared, replaced by a tightly managed system where visibility was restricted. Liza remained inside the office area, while the systems around her continued to fluctuate between active and restricted states. The data she had already accessed affirmed a level of financial and operational coordination that extended far beyond standard logistics processes. As the night progressed, the warehouse transitioned into a locked operational mode, isolating internal activity from outside access. By the time normal operations resumed externally, there was no trace of her presence leaving the facility. After Lisa Ramos failed to return from the warehouse, the company moved quickly to control the narrative. Within hours, internal communications labeled her absence as a voluntary resignation. Official statements described her departure as unexpected but orderly, suggesting she had left Singapore to pursue personal opportunities abroad. The explanation was simple, clean, and designed to prevent immediate suspicion. However, those closest to her work began noticing inconsistencies almost immediately. Her workstation remained untouched, with personal items still present, including identification documents and company access devices. Her apartment was also undisturbed, with no signs of hurried packing or planned relocation. Financial records showed no unusual withdrawals, and her accounts remained active but unused. These details contradicted the official version of events, creating quiet concern among a small group of employees. At the same time, internal systems within the shipping company began undergoing subtle changes. Audit logs linked to the warehouse had been modified, with several entries rewritten or erased entirely. Surveillance records from the night of her disappearance were incomplete, and certain time segments were missing from backup storage. These alterations suggested coordinated data management rather than technical failure. As questions began circulating informally, pressure grew on external auditors who were reviewing the company's logistics operations. Their initial findings revealed mismatches between financial records and physical cargo movements. Some shipments had been processed without proper documentation, while others showed signs of retroactive approval. These patterns aligned with the same irregularities Liza had been investigating before her disappearance. The growing evidence triggered deeper scrutiny from regulatory bodies. Investigators started tracing financial pathways linked to offshore accounts and shell companies connected to the shipping network. What initially appeared as isolated accounting issues began forming a broader structure of concealed transactions and controlled information flow. As investigations expanded, attention turned toward the warehouse operations. Internal documents revealed that access logs had been manually adjusted during critical time windows, and multiple security overrides had been executed from high-level administrative accounts. This suggested involvement from individuals with significant authority within the organization. Public confidence in the shipping empire began to weaken as news of irregularities slowly surfaced. Business partners grew cautious, and shipping contracts faced delays as compliance reviews increased. The company's reputation, once built on reliability and precision, started to show visible cracks under external pressure. Despite growing scrutiny, the full truth behind Liza's disappearance remained hidden within layers of manipulated data and controlled systems. Yet each new discovery by investigators brought them closer to understanding the warehouse operation that had gone silent on the night she vanished, marking the beginning of a deeper collapse within the organization's carefully maintained secrecy.